So following on from what Ted has shown you and explained, my preoccupations in 2008 were trying to find a calling and a mission that wasn't corporate, and a conversation with Ted and hearing firsthand from him the stuff that he's just shown you started to get me thinking about Asia, and started to get me wondering about whether there was a possibility of doing something here to effect change on a mass scale. And the reason why I got to this situation was my background. I've been living in Asia since 1998. I was in Hong Kong for nearly 9 years. I've been here for nearly 6 years. And the business that I was involved in was cosmetics and toiletries. And it took me all over Asia, effectively trying to get more people to buy cosmetic and toiletries. It actually took me quite far up country. I wasn't one of those guys who just went to Bangkok. If we went to Thailand, I would go to Bangkok and then to Thani and Hat Yai, and I'd go quite far and wide. The same thing in China. You know, I went to 43 cities in 3 years, and they weren't the big ones. A lot of them were the small ones. And the thing that I saw, of course, you know, 28 years old, it was pretty exciting. It was cool actually going to these places, but as you left the glitz and the glamour and the development, and you know, and building cranes were exciting to me at that time, because it shaped development and I was part of it. You started to see this, and this was really the reality of what's happening in the backwaters of Asia. And the sad fact is, fast forward 14 years later, it's no different, and if anything else, it's getting worse. And those places that didn't have this now have this. And that really is where the whole concern springs from, personally, to say that can't be all that development's about. It can't be the net results of economic development and people you know, gaining more wealth, which should be a good thing, right, leads to this. So hence, LOHAS Asia was born, and we, through our research, started to find that LOHAS as a concept, as Ted's explained, in Asia was actually much more widespread amongst individual consumers here, or known as a term, than it is in the States, which gives us a natural advantage, potentially, to use a language, a vocabulary, concepts that people already are familiar with. And we can do that, things accelerate. So the reason for doing this is that we have a big problem. And in an Asian context, you know, when you talk about problems, really it comes down to population. And there are a lot of people in Asia. And the small, it's actually not a bad proportion. I'm counting in China here, Japan here, by the way. So this is the middle class of Asia Pacific. And by any measures, and we can argue whether it's out by 50 million or 80 million or whatever, but there's about 500 million middle class that are ranked according to economic indicators in Asia. And those middle class today want this kind of life. And the kind of life they want is a modern city life, wearing nice clothes, having all the latest gadgets, living in a nice condo. And who can blame them? Because effectively, one, it's an improvement over their life, in many cases, and two, it's what they've been fed and they've been told is the life that they want to have for so long. Now, I'm not a radical by any means. At the end of the day, I still believe in the power of commerce. So the thinking that I started to think was that naturally people want to develop, people want to have a bit more money, they want to look after their safety, their security, their family's well-being, their children's education, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the fact is we have 3.5 billion people wanting to do that, who currently live a peasant-farmer existence, and that's just a reality. So where are they going to go? And the fact is today, the consumption model that we have created for ourselves is that when you leave poverty and enter the consumption cycle, you actually enter the most wasteful consumption cycle of all. You leave behind a life where you may not have much, but you don't use natural resources wastefully. Then you enter a situation where suddenly everything's disposable, everything's plastic. Where you used to have a banana leaf, now you have a plastic bag. You know, where you used to use a utensil to eat with constantly, or you had chopsticks that you went with and washed and used again, suddenly you're using reusables and throwing them away, plus the little plastic bag was outside. So that's the very first step for this 3.5 billion people, which leads to the problems that I've shown you around this environmentally. And the thinking is, well, does it have to be like that? Well, obviously, the answer is no. It doesn't have to be like that, otherwise I wouldn't bother. But we have to also understand why it's happening. And the reason is why is the perception that we have of ourselves. And when I'm saying ourselves, I'm talking about us all as consumers, because we all consume. Every day we get up and we use something, and generally we buy it from a shop, so we're all consumers. No matter what you do in your life, no matter where you go, especially if you live in a city, the sad fact of the world today is you can't get away from it without consuming every step of the day. And we feel powerless, because we hear a lot of stuff going on. We hear about climate change, we hear about waste, we hear about pollution, we hear about all these things, yet we don't know what we can do. And this is a map of how we think about ourselves. There's 4 things in the world that actually make up the consumption cycle. And they are government, finance, companies, and consumers. That's all there is. And between those 4 things, it all happens. And the world, as we look at it as consumers, is like this. You've got big government, you've got big finance, you've got big companies, and you've got little us. But the reality of it all is, if we really understood our power, it's not that at all. We are the most important people in this whole map, this whole equation. Because if you stop buying something in enough numbers, the company won't work, and the bank won't finance that company. Or if you decide that you're going to change your habits, and I had a great thing in a packaging conference a couple of years ago. If we decided, forget the recycle bins, and forget the bins full stop, we're going to throw every single thing that we use on the street now, on the floor, in the street. Stuff we were told from this high we should never do. But if we all did it, you can pretty much guarantee within 6 months the packaging laws would be changed, because the government could not control that kind of littering. They'd want to change it so they reduce it. But we could do that. There's civil disobedience like that all throughout history. A great example of why toothpaste, I know a lot about toothpaste, so you can ask me things. Toothpaste is in stand-up tubes. And a lot of the reason why you get this toothpaste in stand-up tubes is from Germany in the 1980s, when there was a campaign, and the Green Party is very strong in Germany, a campaign by the Green Party to go into a supermarket, and when you bought something that had secondary packaging that you felt was unnecessary, you threw it on the floor and then took the internal to the checkout. It led to 2 revolutions in packaging. One in toothpaste, they led to stand-up tubes, and the second thing that they invented was you find sometimes they put the barcode on the inside as well as on the outside. That's just because nobody can price the thing up unless you throw them on the outside. But it changed almost overnight. It changed the laws of packaging. And so secondary packaging in Europe particularly is very much more regulated than it is here. But civil disobedience, and it doesn't have to be a massive amount of people, can change. And you're not breaking